For those of you who have not been watching the show or have not been watching the stream or paying attention to the developments in the alternative media space, let me catch you guys up. So not too long ago, about a week ago, and this was maybe 2 weeks after Tim Pool was on stream saying Ukraine is the number one enemy of the world, Ukraine is the number one enemy of the United States. The United States needs to apologize to Russia, the country that started the largest land war in Europe since World War II. We need to go and apologize to them after they committed in the 90s not to invade Ukraine. When you listen to those types of signals, it sends red flags. You start thinking, what is this? This is not how someone would normally react to a geopolitical conflict, even if they were an isolationist. If you were an isolationist, your position would be, I don't care about Donbass. All I care about is my grill and making sure that the government don't touch my bump stocks. You know, this is the type of thing you would be concentrating on if it was just purely libertarian isolationism promoting your belief. But when you're saying stuff like Ukraine is the number one enemy of the world, but climate change, hunger, greed, I don't know, like how the housing crisis, I don't know, like just the mass displacement from water wars, like there's so many different other threats, but Ukraine is the main threat? Really? It's a strange thing, and it sent red flags, so I made a video about it at the time, and then 2 weeks later, we find out that $10 million has been funneled from Russia Today through Czech and British and other shell companies to a media organization founded by Lauren Chen and Donovan of Tenet Media, which recruited a bunch of conservative content creators like Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, Lauren Southern, Dave Rubin, and the others. I know it's Matt and Tyler, but they just get referred to as the others in all of the media articles. So I'm just gonna keep referring to them as the others because that's all the media knows them by, is the others, because their name doesn't help the search algorithm. Their name, they don't got the subs that are going to be looking up name. So why even include it in the article? But they get funneled all this money by Tenet Media. And after being funneled all this money, some of them are even given instructions or guidance to push Russian propaganda. As clear as, hey, look, the Moscow Mall attack was actually organized by Ukraine. Oh, could you suggest that it was done by Ukraine? Now, who knew what? Who knew it was a Russian info op and who was tricked is not exactly clear. The indictment seems to believe that, as it referred to in the indictment, Dave Rubin and Tim Pool were deceived, and it would be reasonable to believe that others could have also been deceived. So assuming that everybody knew what was going on is not something you can do 100%. It's good to have suspicions. I mean, maybe not good. It's understandable under the circumstances, considering how much money we're talking about, $400,000 a month for Benny Johnson, to have questions, especially when you see the type of content Tim Pool's creating and you see the type of lies that Benny Johnson and Tim Pool was pushing. I just found out, by the way, that it wasn't just Benny Johnson that pushed that story about the Moscow ISIS attack being done actually by Ukraine. Apparently, and I can't believe I missed this too, Benny Johnson did it, and we've been talking about it for days, that Benny Johnson took their instructions given to them by these Russian agents and ran with it. So we don't know for sure that he knew they were Russian agents, but we knew he was at least willing to lie for Tenet Media, which in and of itself, can I just say, best case scenario is they were clueless stooges and Benny Johnson and Tim Pool were willing to lie for money, or at least not do their due diligence, is just not ask questions once given the dollar signs. That's the best case scenario. And that's not good. That already smashes your credibility. It's just the others puts into question your basic loyalty to your country. Anyway, though, it wasn't just Benny Johnson who was pushing the Moscow lie while getting paid through these shell companies by the Russian agents. Even if they didn't know, we don't know that for sure. You know, the case isn't settled. Only the indictment's been released. But Tim Pool was also pushing this lie. Listen to this.
These videos get sent to me, of course. I mean, I'm plugged in the news 24/7. And the first thing I said was Ukraine. Only a moron would say otherwise. Ukraine. For what purpose would anyone attack Russia? Now, to be fair, there's a decent probability that ISIS could make sense. because you have Chechnyan Muslims and, other anti-Russian forces that have long plagued Russia. But Ukraine makes the most sense. Now, it could be that the...
Can I just say, if you invade Chechnya and then it comes from what's the plague? Anyway, just moving on. I don't want to get philosophical, but we're missing the point here.
Russia. But Ukraine makes the most sense. Now, it could be that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and these Islamic extremists from Chechnya or neighboring regions may have gone to Ukraine for aid, and it's basically you've got a privateer type scenario. Ukraine says, we're at war, you're at war, what do you want? And these guys say, you give us what we need and we can carry out these attacks. And then Ukraine can deny all involvement. But it's one big war, baby.
So, to be clear, that was all just pure speculation. Every single bit of that was pure speculation based on nothing. And it also happens to be the exact narrative that Tenet Media wanted Benny Johnson and other creators to push about the Moscow terror attack, because that's what was the Kremlin's perspective. That was the perspective you'd see on Russian state TV. The only difference is they wouldn't say maybe it was Ukraine. They said, we know it was Ukraine. Of course it was Ukraine. The Ukrainians, of course, did it. To divert blame and to bring away from the fact and to divert attention away from the fact that the Russians are fighting this gigantic war in Ukraine while unable to protect themselves from terror groups at home. While diverting tons of resources to fight this war overseas, they cannot protect Russia at home. So Ukraine was blamed by the Russians, but they haven't presented any evidence. They didn't present any evidence that they actually were trying to cross the border into Ukraine. They never presented any evidence that they were given weapons by the Ukrainians. They weren't presented any evidence, or anybody was presented any evidence that they were paid by the Ukrainians, or there were any financial transactions, or there were any communications between Ukrainian agents, Ukrainian government officials, Ukrainian anything, even just a guy that once could speak or has seen a Ukrainian in the purview of his eye, to these guys who conducted the attack or the wider terror network of ISIS, which of course extends outside of Russia. Now, I will also say that if you see none of these warning signs, but only the Russians are saying, oh, it's probably the Ukrainians, and then Tim runs and says, of course, my first thought was Ukraine. It's, it could have been the terrorists. All the warning signs are there for the terrorist attack. I saw the footage. We're not going to replay it for TOS reasons. They're firing like very, very randomly. They're very unorganized in how they're firing. These are not very good guns. Like she said, oh, provide them with weapons and stuff. These guns are jamming like crazy. I would not be surprised if the rifles, and I have to go back and check if these weapons they were using were like handcrafted, as in they were done in some workshop in somebody's basement, and to either extend magazines or do different stuff to try to get a workable rifle that they could use for the attack. That, if you're being sponsored and supplied weapons, as Tim Pool's talking about, I don't understand why the Ukrainian government would give them a here's your guide to make a gun like list that would already probably exist on the internet anyway. I mean, 3D printing exists, when they could just give them any of the rifles that they have from their stock of former Soviet rifles that nobody would be any the wiser came from Ukrainian stock because, well, Russia's full of old Soviet stock. But that's not what happened. That's not they use these weird, if you look at the guns, they're sparking like crazy. They're not guns in great condition. The way they're firing, when they shoot the rifles, they're going like, doo, 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 like they're trying to throw the bullets at the people. That's not what a trained assassin or soldier, that's not how they fire a gun. That's how somebody who's an amateur, who probably has never heard a man before or ever done something like that, that's how they would do it. But not somebody who knows how to fire a gun. So not Ukrainian agents. Anyway, he didn't present, two folks, thank you so much for the tier 1. There's no evidence, but he suggests that, oh, this is what I believed immediately, this is immediately what I thought, this is what was likely, and is suggesting it like a plausible scenario, which just so happens to be the exact scenario that Tenet Media was trying to push at the time and got Benny Johnson to push. And because, I want to put this out there because Tim Pool claimed journalistic independence in this scandal. Tim Pool did not just say, hey guys, Tim Pool just didn't say, hey, they helped us with our content and did this and did this. He said the only thing, morally corrupt, hey, Chicken, thank you so much for the 5 gifts of tier 1 subs, buddy. You didn't have to do that. Thank you. Thank you. I'd stay and thank for more time, but I gotta keep moving on this story. What Tim Pool said was that all he did was license it. That's all that he did. They licensed the stuff out to the company and then they could broadcast it. But if he's also getting news stories from them, then it's not just, oh, he's licensing from this Russian cutout organization. No, he's also taking advice and taking stories from them, which is not that surprising. A lot of these organizations do that. I mean, I've worked with organizations that have done that before. That's quite common in the space. And is becoming more common in the space as more outside money enters the space. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened. Now, we don't know exactly where he got the story from. I guess he could have stumbled on this crazy, extremely speculative, just happens to align perfectly with what the Russian government wanted narrative, while at the same time being paid by this Russian government cutout. Like, that's possible. And that they didn't ask while we know they were asking other creators at the time and posting it in the Discord channel that Tim pulls in. But I think that the dots seem to line up pretty clearly. Now, I wanted to move on from this, though, and quickly watch Tim Pool's interview with Ben Shapiro talking about this before we reread the Lauren Southern statement. Thank you for the 100 bits, Bop and Wap. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, again, best case scenario, they're all Russian stooges. You should not trust them to do proper investigations. If they can't investigate where their old buddy's coming from, you should not trust them when it comes to this issue specifically, just due to the question marks that are still in the air, and the record of what they have said about the war, which is lying. I mean, and when you say they, I don't want to say every single person, because I haven't gone through Tyler's or Matt's background on the war and watched all of their content, because, I mean, they've all been employed by Tenet. I mean, not all of them. Many of them have been employed by Tenet Media for like over a year or near a year, so I'm not going to go back and watch every single video. But we know from the little bit of digging we have done that both Benny Johnson and Tim Pool, while being thrown lines from the Ruskies, were lying about the war, while getting paid indirectly by the Russians. Now, if it is the scenario where they're stooges, then it's the Russians see them lying and they're giving them money to help them lie better, which is not good because it means they didn't check their money. They're being promoted because they're liars. They're being promoted because they destabilize the conversation around the war. And when I say destabilize the conversation, I mean add in information that is gunk. That's like, hey, let's have a conversation about the artillery production and like what's actually possible in the war. And then Tim Pool comes in as Ukraine did ISIS. Ukraine did ISIS. It's like, okay, well, it's not kind of hard to have a conversation about long-range strike policy if we're living in fantasy land where Ukraine is basically like Darth Vader incarnate, and Tim Pool's talking about them as if they're the four horsemen of the apocalypse while just so happening to get Russian money, which again is not impossible, but it stretches my faith in the goodness of other human beings for me to immediately assume that and take that at face value. Doesn't even stretch it. I think it would snap it. So I wanted to watch this Tim Pool interview because this is the first interview Tim has done about the situation, and he did it with a conservative outlet, which not terribly surprising considering the circumstances. He probably, and I would think everybody involved is probably pretty defensive right now. You know, their reputations are getting dragged through the dirt pretty heavily. Much of it deserved, some of it not, but much of it deserved. And I wanted to see what Tim would press them on, if Tim would ask actually difficult questions, if Tim is just going to throw him a bunch of softballs, and how Tim is going to approach crowds that are not necessarily his audience. Because while I'm sure Tim and Ben Shapiro has overlap in their audiences, they're not the same YouTubers, they're not the same creators. And so I want to see if Tim would be more apologetic talking to other audiences, saying like, hey guys, you know, I should have done more research, I should have done it. Or if he's just going to be like, nope, I'm the victim, as he has mostly done up to this point.
Joining us on the line right now is Tim Pool. He is host of Timcast IRL, a CEO of Timcast.com, and host of the Culture War podcast. You can see that over at his YouTube channel. Tim, thanks for joining the show. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
So there are two big stories that you are currently involved in. One wasn't enough for you. One of them is, of course, the very widely covered story about a DOJ indictment involving apparently Tenet Media. Tenet Media, according to the allegations, was being paid effectively by a Russian front. And when I say the company was, what I really mean is the founders of the company apparently were, if the allegations in the indictment are true. And all the media ran with was that because you are a host whose show is posted at Tenet Media, that this must have implicated you or Dave Rubin or Benny Johnson.
Why would this be the way we angle it going in? Why don't you just throw the facts out there and then ask Tim Pool to lie it out as he may. You don't need to set it up for him. It's not like Tim Pool needs help in like defending himself, does he? Look, we just started. I don't want to get too nitpicky, but whatever.
Posted at Tenet Media that this must have implicated you or Dave Rubin or Benny Johnson. Why don't you give us sort of the rundown of what's going on here?
Yeah, the simple version is the Culture War podcast.
I'll bet your parents are proud of you. Great work.
No, thank you. That was very nice.
Existed well before Tenet Media or any licensing agreement. We had the show. So I've got multiple YouTube channels. One is youtube.com/Timcast. That was my original channel where.
Okay, can I just say, if I was doing an interview like this, the questions I would focus on is not the stuff that we would just be speculating on. I would ask a question like, did you know or did you see any red flags? That'd be the type of stuff I would ask, of course, because you need to just get them on record. But the stuff I would want to focus on more is, what type of checks do you do when somebody comes and offers you that type of money? Like, what type of background checks? How do you make sure that they're real, et cetera, et cetera? Because if you're not willing to do this, how are people willing to trust your investigative skills on other issues? That would be something you could maybe put to him. Try to get his process of how this got over his beanie. That would be a question I'd be interested in asking Tim. I would also be interested in asking Tim about the type of content he was producing while being sponsored by the Russian government. Not only to get down and be like, hey, you were saying Ukraine's the #1 enemy of the world while getting paid by the Russians, isn't this suspicious? Like the obvious conclusion there, or the obvious kind of like warning signs and smoke. But also the less obvious question, which isn't just, hey, are you getting paid by the Russians? And then just pushing the propaganda because you're getting paid by the Russians, you want to renew that. But also, why would, even if that wasn't the case, and they were just sponsoring you because they liked your content and you never knew, why do you think they were? What is it about your content that does that? And I've seen Tim try to engage with this question a little bit, and he kind of like gives up every time. Because every time he says, well, I criticize Kamala too, so I don't know why they would want to interact with my content and support the reason why is because he's constantly talking about civil war and how America's collapsing and that 50 state sweep type of stuff. Well, Trump does legalize marijuana, 50 state sweep. That type of stuff that either highlights social division, could enhance social division, and I think the type of commentary Tim Pool does is divisive. I think that's not a very high standard to meet when I'm talking about Tim's content. You can see it from him just hitting the table and talking about America as the enemy, Ukraine's the enemy of America, et cetera, or talking about the incoming civil war, et cetera, et cetera. Why would they want his content to do well? That's the question I would want someone like Ben to ask him.
I used to host
because if the Russian government is actively trying to cause like foment riots and division in the United States, and we know this is like public record, shouldn't it be concerning if people in your space are taking money from them? And it shouldn't just be a question of why that person took money, what did they know, but why would, in any scenario, the Russians want to give them money? It's not out of kindness.
PM, half an hour podcast. We switched formats because I have a couple channels. One was redundant. I have another one that's basically the same thing. They're kind of redundant. So we turned this one into a Friday morning live show about cultural issues. So it's politics doesn't, come in relatively often, but, we did one on dating. We did an episode on simulation theory versus Christianity and religion. So it's not an overtly political show. That show was licensed for principal broadcast, non-exclusive to Tenet Media. That's it. The show exists still to this day, and it will be at youtube.com/Timcast on Fridays. So with this story, we're hearing that these allegations, it's kind of crazy. I mean,
Wow.
Lauren Chen, I guess she's been fired from the Blaze. I don't know a lot about what's going on. In fact, I think I only talked to her a couple times this year. For me, we had an existing show that a new show we had launched, had been up for a few months. We hosted people like Vivek Ramaswamy on it, and we were preparing to engage in sponsorships. And
by the way, Vivek Ramaswamy, that's another interesting. I don't want to call him a creator, but he was the guy who was saying that American weapons going to Ukraine was being rediverted to go to the cartels, and the pictures he posted of it didn't even show the weapons that he said they showed. And that's a guy that wanted to be president of the United States, controlling gun control policy.
They were getting hundreds of thousands of views per episode. And we decided to license it out because Lauren contacted us and was saying, you know, we'd love to license something from you. And I said, well, we don't need to do that. We're an independent company. We have our own members and sponsorships. And then it took quite a while, but long story short, we agreed to a non-exclusive.
Okay, wait a second. That's a wait. That's a big jump, isn't it? At first I said, no, I don't want your money. But then, long story short, I was like, sure, give me your money. He was, okay. What happened in between there that convinced you from saying, no, I'm independent. We don't have foreign backers? Because Tim used to talk about on his show, and I don't know if this was during the Tenet stuff or before it, but I know this was the case. I just remember it. Him saying how they don't have those types of like, those big backers that are like finance. They don't have the financiers backing their operation. They're independent, quote unquote. Which, I mean, if these big media conglomerates are giving you all the money, you're not completely independent. No, you can't claim complete financial independence. At least you can still try to claim editorial independence, but you're not you're financially dependent on an organization that wants to push values in a certain way. It was very clear from the content creators that they had recruited. And now we know for sure what values they were trying to push.
Broadcast license, which meant that we own the show. The show is owned by the Culture War Company, which is its own company. We own distribution rights. We own audio distribution rights, everything about it. They just effectively paid for a license, which would have it appear on their YouTube channel Friday mornings at 10 a.m. And with that, they got to use my likeness and things like that. And so now with these allegations, I don't know what's going on there, but I don't know if you want to ask any questions so we can elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only questions that, given the media coverage, I think the question that people in the media are pushing, at least, is the idea that there must have been some sort of outside, external Russian control of your show. Maybe you want to address how you do the editorial at your show.
Wait, I'm sorry. When you say Russian editorial control of a show, does it have to be control for it to be bad? Can it be influence? Like if for example, let's say that I am a sitting United States senator and I am designing, let's say, trade policy with, I don't know, Malaysia. And then we find out that my top advisor is heavily paid by the Malaysian government. And that same advisor, who has been funneling me money the entire time, has also been whispering my ear about the issue and been influencing me. Because the organization was pushing the mall attack. Benny ran with it. Tim ran with it too. We don't know if he got it from them or if he picked up the exact same narrative from somewhere else while he happened to be in their Discord and getting paid by them. But that right there, you might not say it's editorial control because they couldn't tell him you have to do this. But it's certainly, if that story did come from them, which is certainly, I think, a likely scenario. I don't know, it's not a certain scenario, but a likely scenario, then that would be influence, wouldn't it? Hell, even if you're just in the Discord, just consuming that information as it comes out, that'd be in a way influence. But when they throw out a story, he picks up the same story, runs with it, it's not true at all. I mean, best case scenario, he picked up a lie from somewhere else that happened to favor the Russians.
Was Lauren ever talking to you about the editorial content of the show or anything like that?
Nope. So I barely even talked to Lauren. And it's kind of crazy. I've known her for a long time. So when she said that
Let's see the communications. I've been saying this since the start. Release the communications with Lauren Chen. Release the communications with anybody at Tenet Media. Let's see the Discord channel. Let's see the Discord channel logs. There's more than one person in that Discord. They could have grabbed it. They could have yoinked it. They could have spread it around. They could have it right now for all I know. Post it. Show what was so convincing. Show what happened from Tim Pool going from, I don't want to take your money to, never mind. Show what happened from, I want to have a call with this Hungarian businessman to, yes, give me your $100,000 per episode. I want to see that transition because we don't hear anything about it here. We hear nothing. It's just like, they didn't directly control everything I said. Okay, well, that's a pretty high standard. What about all the other details that the indictment does talk about? And what about the lies that you did push?
She was launching a company. She had investors. I'm like, okay. I mean, I hear that 50 times a year. And in the podcast space, we just heard that I think Travis Kelce is getting a $100 million contract.
Could you imagine? Can we just say, could you imagine an excuse for any other organization like this? Like a CNN journalist saying like, so my source ended up being a Chinese spy, but like, someone came to me, they said they had a source, and I'm like, I get 1,000 sources a year. Yeah, but that's your job. That's your job, is to check this stuff. You're talking about your editorial independence. You're talking about your financial independence. You're talking about being, the alternative to mainstream media influenced by the big corporations, like the military industrial complex. And then you're taking the money too and not asking questions. And then you end up taking money from foreign agents. You can't claim that, I did nothing wrong here, or completely put off any blame when you end up with foreign agent money in your pocket and you didn't ask any questions about where this money was coming from. I mean, if you did, then like tell me all the things you know about the Hungarian businessmen and the investors, about the Czech companies, the money's coming through, anything.
So these numbers that's where they're at. I think people don't realize how big the podcasting space is and the revenue that you generate from sponsorships and memberships. So it seemed kind of, I don't know, mundane to a certain extent. A lot of people think these numbers are huge.
I'm sorry. Dragon, thank you so much for the YouTube membership. I'm sick of this talking point. I really am sick of it because I keep hearing it from people, and maybe they're just so disconnected with the rest of society that it's just impossible for them to. Jerome, thank you so much for the YouTube sub. I appreciate that. JP gifted 5. That's what happened. Thank you, JP. I don't. He was making $100,000 per episode. Tim Pool didn't have the best deal. I think that's partially because he didn't negotiate it well. Benny Johnson got $400,000 a month plus $100,000 signing bonus. What Tim Pool made for one episode could fund my Ukraine operation for like a year. So to be blunt with you,
morally corrupt.
When I hear Tim Pool say like, this is like in the grand scheme of things, $100,000 an episode is a substantial amount of money. If you just put that money away, you're putting it over like $1 million away every year, easy.
John Brown Enthusiast has donated $5. Sorry to derail, but I wanted to watch the stream from the beginning. But did you see where a commentator on RT mentioned the Texas secession semi-conspiracy?
Well, of course, like Russia Today and Russian bots have been caught pushing. Well, not Russia Today specifically, but Russian bots have been caught pushing secessionist movements, specifically the Texas secession movement as well, because it causes political division. And it's something that if America's more divided, then we're not busy in Europe. It's as simple as that. Like NFL players make how much a game? How much do NFL players make a game? Okay? Let me look this up. How much does an average NFL player make a game? The average NFL player makes about $800,000 a year. Wow. So that means Tim is making more talking for 2.5 hours in his studio than an NFL player makes getting brain damage on the field in front of millions of Americans with sponsorships blaring over them from the wealthiest companies in the world. It's not that much money. I mean, other companies offer more. Come on, Tim. What has the money done to you, Tim? Come back to us, Tim. Actually, don't come back to us. I don't know if we want you anymore.
Huge. But yeah, so I don't know. Ask me again. I'm losing my train of thought.
Yeah, no. I mean, the only question was basically whether you were in control of the editorial, and it sounds like you were. So,
I mean, the Culture War show is a conversation show on various topics. The subject matter of the show editorially is there's no thought into it. We had been.
That's probably true. You know what? I won't deny him that one.
Talking about hosting a show on religious debate and simulation theory and AI.
Hey, thank you so much for the 5 gifted. I appreciate that. Thank you. Man, we're getting some really generous people in chat today. I really do appreciate it, everybody.
Burns is an immoral.
My goodness, you don't need to be so nice.
Bankrupt man.
Don't you guys know that, like, actually, never mind. $100,000 is nothing. It's like, in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. So what's five gifted subs? Why don't you give me 100,000 gifted subs so we can get somewhere close to like a real paycheck? Okay, for real. Thank you.
So I talked to my booking agent and said, can we find a guy who talks about AI and simulation and then do a 2-hour conversation? That's the gist of it. That's how the show was produced. The first episode that actually appeared on Tenet was about skateboarding. quite literally, we had a professional skateboard filmer, an amateur, and a professional skateboarder, and we talked about skateboarding.
Why would the Russians care? Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm done playing patty cake, okay, with these people over how, like, these. He's now been in this for over a week, okay? He should be informed enough to understand that it's not about that one show even necessarily. That one show helps build up Tenet Media. It's about Tim Pool directing his audience to Tenet Media, where they will then funnel them Russian propaganda. They're taking his credibility with his audience, his face, his name, his brand, and using it to enhance their own, just as they did with Dave Rubin, just as they did with Lauren Southern, just as they did with Benny Johnson, just as they did with the other smaller right-wing content creators that are going to add a little bit more authenticity because, oh, look, they're coming in and helping the small-time content creators. And at the same time, while they're using your credibility to build up their brand, using your content to build up their channel for their propaganda outlet, at the same time, they're giving you money so that you can help produce your content, which to say is politically divisive is undercutting it. Once I do this every time, but Tim Pool Civil War tweets. Can we do this again? Do we have to do this again? Do we have to do this like every single time? By the way, these tweets are like out of date. There's more Civil War tweets since then. There's more Civil War commentary since then. This is not even including all of the streams and such. If anything, this is not really a full picture. But you are in a civil war. Civil war, it all depends on what happens next. But should this escalate, history will regard everything happening now as the second American Civil War period. You are in a civil war. You were in a civil war. 5 years ago, it was civil. Why would the Russians, if they want political division, want this man to have all the money necessary to keep producing this?
Because I'm a skateboarder, and that's what we do. So I mean, it's kind of crazy to hear that they're saying the media's jumped the gun completely on what the story is. The DOJ indictment literally says that commentators were deceived, that there was a rather sophisticated plan to manipulate the commentators of the platform.
Sophisticated? Does it say sophisticated? Because Tim said sophisticated on his show. Does the DOJ indictment say sophisticated? Does it say sophisticated? They had a PDF doc to convince you that this guy that had nothing on the internet was real, a real investor. You could find nothing on them, no records. Didn't check with the, oh, he does banking in Brussels. Oh, okay, well then let's go check the banking in Brussels. There must be some financial record for such a big financier who can waste $10 million in under a year funding Tim Pool screeching about Ukraine. A sophisticated. I don't believe let me look it up. DOJ indictment. Full text. And I'll just do a quick search.
A curd is a curd.
Remink0n has donated $100.
Whoa.
Fighting Bruther.
Bruther. Thank you, man. That's really helpful. I just looked it up. Let me do it again. Sorry, he said sophisticated? Let me do it. What? I'm sorry. What was that again, computer? Sorry. One more time. Oh, can you check in the back? Oh, can you check in the attic? Oh, can you check under the sink? Oh, can you check maybe in the shed? I don't know. Could you just call another store, see if there may be some other carriers? Oh, man, sophisticated's not in there. Ooh, sorry. It's not. Rough. Thanks for the $100. I appreciate it. So he didn't find sophisticated and I made $100. That was a good 1 minute. Thank you, Remington.
So they wouldn't know what was going on.
That'll unironically go towards translation, by the way.
And I can say on my end, you know, everything that happens here goes through our legal team, and we have multiple lawyers. So when someone reaches out to me and says, "Hey, we want to do a potential," like we have sponsorships, and I don't know who these companies are, and we're a company with like.
Wait, he doesn't check. I'm sorry. He checks none of them. They don't check any of them. And let's be clear, you said no originally. Tim, you can't say, "Oh, I don't check any of them. It doesn't matter." But then to say, "I also said no originally." If it was like always like, "Oh, and just another sponsorship," that'd be one thing. But you said that you said no, and then had to be convinced. Make a long story short, You were convinced, maybe by the money, but by what? I have no idea. And now you're on it. That's a little. So you had time to consider it. You said no, so you did consider it. You at one point you saw that maybe something was awry, or you weren't convinced. And so the idea of like, oh, I don't know these guys. You just said that you were saying no to it. So obviously, if you're going in to intervene and say no, you know something, right?
40 employees. And so when someone reaches out to us, I say, great, cool. Someone handle it and talk to the lawyers. The lawyers come back, do their due diligence, and then we say, sure, or whatever.
Due diligence. What due diligence is that? And are we keeping those lawyers?
And so the crazy thing is, this was so ancillary to anything we do. You know, I do my morning show from 10 to noon now. At the time, it wasn't live, but now it's live. And then we do Timcast IRL from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. And so I don't really think much at all about where the show is streaming or distribution. For all I knew.
So why did you say no and then yes? So you did think about it. And if not, and you're saying the lawyers do the due diligence, since you put that work to somebody else, you're still the head of the company. The thing still falls, the bottom dollar still falls to you. You're the one going out there and broadcasting these opinions. It's your show. So while you could maybe try to divert some blame to someone else, like if somebody in the White House staff releases like a bad statement on an issue and it causes a crisis, or you know, a decision is diverted to a White House staffer and then they make a call that ends up hurting the administration, whoever diverted that responsibility still holds responsibility. Of course, the lawyers themselves bear responsibility to Tim, but Tim bears responsibility to his audience and the wider public and to the American judicial system.
This was, you know, Lauren Chen. She works at The Blaze. She wanted to start a company. She found investors. That was seemingly the gist of it. We only ever took money from an American corporation. The amount of money that we were offered for the show was around.
But this is the problem. If this is that, it's like, well, I just checked. They were American, and that was good with me. That's all the investigation we're doing. So if you just ended up taking like Republican Party money, because that Republican Party, like different political PACs, they go out there and they fund different stuff. If you would you have not like made a conscious decision? I'm not even saying, oh, how dare you? That's not even my commentary. It's just that if you make a conscious decision about, I feel like that should be conscious. It shouldn't be, oh, whoopsie, didn't know I was taking money from X, Y, and Z. It should be, I have made the conscious and transparent decision to do this, right? Like I'm very transparent about, I work with Progressive Victory, right? I work with Progressive Victory. They pay me a stipend to advise them and work with them on stuff because I have political beliefs. I've been politically involved, and I will continue to probably be involved in Democratic Party politics for the foreseeable future until either I can't or I get, or for whatever reason, I can't work in the field anymore because, I don't know, maybe it drives me crazy, which is always a possibility. But the point is to be transparent about that, to be open about that, to say that openly, not to just take money, not talk about it really on stream, where you're getting the money, where the money come from. I have no idea. I'm not going to look into it. Well, I don't know. They're American. Because if I just said Progressive Victory gets money from other organizations that give them grants, many of which want the Democratic Party to win. If I took money from Progressive Victory and someone said, Dylan, did you know that you took like some money that would be considered blue money, like Democrat money? And I was like, oh my God, what? No, of course I know that because it's duh. I worked to get Democrats elected. I want Democrats to win elections. That's what I want because I'm a progressive and I'm open about that and I'm transparent about that. And I don't think that the goal with all the alternative media space is to just create a completely unbiased environment, or even like an environment where there's no money coming into the space, because I do think money can help. It's just that it has to be transparent. And if we do it this way, you're going to bust it up, and it's going to be nerve-wracking for anyone to accept any money in the space. It's going to hurt the credibility of the space. And I think as Tim Pool wants to be this person who like strives for like alternative media content creation, he has done some real damage to the image of alternative media and their journalistic independence, which was supposed to be one of the main advantages of alternative media compared to the mainstream press, is that we're not controlled by the big sponsors and the what's it and the who's it, what's it. Hi, Progressive, wait, you guys are getting paid? Shh, just a little bit. Odid UK, thank you so much for the primer. I appreciate that.
A curd is a curd.
Tucker Carlson, at the height of his popularity with Fox, was pulling around $100,000 per night, $20 million contract.
Yep.
200 plus shows a year. He thinks he's worth Tucker Carlson money.
I mean, and the thing is, other people are getting more money. And let's just not pretend it's not a lot of money. If we pretend it's not a lot of money and we're talking about $100,000 per episode, come on. Come on. You've lost the plot. Thank you for the $20. I appreciate that, buddy. Man, everybody's being really generous today.
Around market.
Dude, are you guys my Ukrainian sponsors? Maybe that's how the Russians need to do it next time. They need to just divert them a bunch of YouTube subscriptions. Quick. Channel memberships. Throw them out.
Value for offers we had already received. And so it was just like, cool, I know Lauren, sure, whatever. And then you got Benny and Dave and Matt Christensen and Taylor Hansen, who I know them all. And I'm like, yeah, this seems fine, whatever.
See, what he's talking about right now is why the Russians wanted Tim. He's like, oh, look at all these credible voices in the well, I mean, credible depends on who you are. But look at all these credible voices in the conservative space. I'm safe here. That's what they then wanted to use Tim Pool's image to do to other people. That Tim Pool was like creator 1 and 2, like 1 and 2, like he was getting recruited into this, not just to promote to his audience, but also to, again, add his credibility to the organization.
And the crazy thing is, assuming all this stuff is true, I'm like, man, this sucks. We didn't need the deal. The deal didn't do anything for us. It was just, sure, I guess. And the bummer is now with the way things are going, we could have just run the culture war on my channel with 1.3 million subscribers as it is, and just made money on our own through sponsors as we already did. So it's frustrating to get entangled in whatever it is she's accused of being involved in.
Folks, our friends in Israel need our help now more than ever. If you're...
Okay, Tim, are you going to press him on anything? Tim, before we talk about Israel?
10% off.
Israel.
You'll love what you receive, and you'll be making a real difference. That's artsabox.com, promo code BEN10. Support Israel in a tangible way. Get your Artsa box today. Yeah, it must be frustrating also. I mean, listen, you and I disagree, I think, on some of the elements around the Ukraine war, but the idea that's been put forth by the media is that somehow you are being paid directly by Vladimir.
Why is this? You are the first person. You were the first person to interview Tim Pool about this. He has described nothing about how they convinced him to get on board. He even says that he disagreed and then agreed. Why not just follow up like, how did they convince you? What did they talk to you about? What did those conversations look like? Give me some why is it, wow, yeah, Tim, I can't believe the media is so mean to you. Ben, I know, look, you're an opinionated person. You're going online, share your opinions. You're not pretending not to be an opinionated person. But you could at least attempt to give the veneer of a not favorable interview.
Putin in order to express those views, and that therefore anybody who disagrees with sort of the democratic take or even the sort of moderate Republican take on this must be paid by Russia. That, of course, is an absurdity, and I think it is wrapped into a broader narrative.
No, of course, not everyone, but Tim was.
That seems to be ramping up just in time for the election, which is that Russia's going to interfere in the election on behalf of Donald Trump, and
what is the narrative? What are they doing? We're just going to call it. It's happening. It's right there. Ben? What is the interview about, Ben? What would you call this, interference, or would you call this like casual democratic intervention? What would you call this?
Everybody on the right is in some form or fashion working for the Russians, which is...
Who is saying that? Shallow.
Why they're for Donald Trump in the first place.
Yeah, here we go again. I mean, my views probably align more with the Libertarian Party. That's it. Russia sucks. I'm not a fan of Russia. I think Vladimir Putin is a dictator who's used unethical and dictatorial means.
I know a lot of libertarians. There are not many libertarians that I know, and I'm sure there are some, maybe in the Mises caucus, and I'm sure I know they exist because I see them online, but majority of libertarians I know are not like, and even the ones that are in the Mises caucus, very few of them would go as far to say Ukraine is the #1 enemy of the world while smashing their table. That doesn't seem like an everyday opinion for anyone to have on the war. Definitely if you check American public opinion polling, with I think only like 6 or 7 or 8% of the American public having a positive view of Russia and Vladimir Putin, and but most having a very positive view of Ukraine.
Means to maintain power for decades, and I've long said that. My principal point is, you know, my opposition to the war is that we are spending hundreds of billions of dollars at a time when we're dealing with infrastructure problems, we're dealing with border problems, and now with the clip they're circulating.
That's true. We could have used some of those cluster bombs to secure better schooling.
Right now is my
I'm sure, like, of course, there's money that you allocate money into the budget here, and then money is then spent here. But a lot of this is stuff in our reserves. A lot of this is old Vietnam War era equipment we're going to have to dismantle anyway. People just see big dollar sign next to aid amount, and they don't think about how that's broken down or what, how much of that equipment we would have had to do, like, controlled destruction of anyway that would have cost us more money. There's like no deeper thought put into it. Or like the commitments or promises we made. And I think like the promises we make to other countries should matter. American credibility should matter. To say that America should not be involved in the world after we've gained what we wanted from our interactions and our diplomacy from other states before we've delivered on our side of the bargain is how you smash your own credibility.
Desperation and outrage to hear that with U.S. resources, not weapons, but with training and things of this matter, Ukraine's invaded Russian territory, pushing us to the brink of large-scale international conflict, which terrifies me.
My gosh. You know, when we first sent over the weapons, we were at the brink of large-scale... Wait, when you say large-scale international conflict, this is already it's the largest scale war in Europe since World War II. Ukraine invaded Russia. Ukraine crossed a lot of red lines, and nuclear war has not happened. And I don't understand how the Russians getting invaded by Ukraine in this manner would create conditions that would favor them in a war with Europe that would make them go through the decision-making process of, okay, now we have to fight in Kursk. Our lines were so stretched that they could invade us in Kursk. Let's open up another front. And it'd be one thing if Tim said, you know, this type of stuff is risky, or this type of stuff, you know, creates tension, and, you know, this type of confrontation between nuclear states is concerning war. No, it's like we're at the brink of large. What he's saying, the type of language he has and he's talking about is the type of stuff where families need to be like, okay, I need to start getting the bomb shelters. And he's talking not as, okay, what is the likely scenario to come out here? He is talking in a way to grab the audience's attention and to like feed into the algorithm. He's not talking in a way about the issue that's going to be constructive to informing people about the actual risks at play from the Kursk incursion. The Russians have mostly been trying to downplay the incursion to try to avoid political fallout for Putin. How can you on one hand start World War III over an incursion while also downplaying it? None of this comes into Tim's analysis because his analysis is incredibly shallow, and he always finds the shortest pathway to be against aid in any discussion.
And so that pisses me off. That being said, Russia should never have invaded Ukraine. Russia was wrong to do it. They lost the soft power battle, and they're resorting desperate tactics to do it. And then we find ourselves entrenched in some conflict because of Ukraine. They're posting these things about, you know, I mean, I remember I went out with you guys. I had supported Ron DeSantis early on, 21 or in 2022, until things started to shift. I felt like Ron wasn't going to be able to win. Now they're acting like that was all of a sudden I got paid to change my opinions. And this is the unfortunate thing. The ultimate smear is the revenue that we were paid through the licensing deal was inconsequential to my lifestyle, to the bottom line of the company. And
what he's saying is he's very, very, very wealthy, so $100,000 means very little to him, is the impolite, blunt way of putting it.
We've actually never done anything with it. I would say, like, you know, the overwhelming majority of the money is just not gone anywhere.
Come on, can you really? What do you mean? I just put all my money in my big vault. That isn't greedy. I didn't. When I put all the gold doubloons in my big giant vault, that wasn't. This isn't an example of greed as I swim through the money vault. No, no, no. See, if I was greedy, I would have already spent it. Money is an end of in and of itself for a lot of. I mean, what do I have to describe why having a lot of money is good? Do I need to sit here and be the other end of when Tim says like, oh, this money, this is what $100,000 an episode could do for you. This is how you could stretch it out to like over $1 million a year. This is what $1 million a year can do for you. By the way, Tim Pool lives in West Virginia, a state that has a pretty low cost of living in the United States. So that money also goes a lot further.
And, you know, we have people tweeting at me like, give the money back or whatever it is. Like, dude, let me put it this way. We're talking to our legal team. I can say that I just announced I've been contacted by the FBI as a victim of a potential victim in a crime. They have stated that I may have information relevant to their ongoing investigation and requested a voluntary interview. So, engaging with counsel, we are going to provide assistance in whatever way we can, and that's about it. I mean, it's they say it's like an arm's length deal. That's what it's always referred to. And I'm like, man, I don't even know what that means. I know that we had a show that already existed that talks about video games, dating, culture, some political issues. We had an Israel-Palestine debate, and we licensed it for publication, non-exclusive. Like that's the crazy thing. It's like it was not even an exclusive show. It's a non-exclusive. We published it other places. We own the rights for all of it, and so now we get entrenched in whatever this is. And I'm just like, nah, I don't have anything to do with this.
If you didn't want anything to do with it, Tim, you shouldn't have took the money.
I don't know what it is Lauren Chen was doing. I'm quite perturbed by.
How inconvenient! All this money I have.
The allegations. I don't know what'll turn out to be.
If the money isn't that much, then take it all and donate it to Ukraine.
True, but I'm pissed.
So he's
pissed. Yes.
One story involving you. The other one is that
okay, I don't care about the Kamala Harris suing thing. Okay, it's boring. It's gonna go nowhere. Man. Ben gave a piss poor interview. He just basically let Tim completely guide the narrative. No follow-up questions after that indictment. If this was Hunter Biden, what type of questions do you think Ben would ask? If this was like anyone else that we heard, we're talking about Eric Swalwell. Do you think when Ben talked to Eric Swalwell, he'd be like, well, obviously you couldn't have known, so it's no. It would have been a different conversation. It would have been a different discussion. This not only, I think, shows that I think Tim, if put under heat of a good independent interviewer that wouldn't be just giving him softballs, would probably not be able to deal or would just basically have to resort to no comment quite a lot. And it also shows that Ben probably should not be the first person that people run to if they want to give a good, transparent interview about a scandal they're on while on the American right. Why won't you play them? Okay, that's enough to Dan about. We're just getting into the topics, okay? Now this is evil. How dare you?